What's up, and welcome back to the number one show in sports and entertainment. I'm your guy, Earl Hill, and the show is Earl Knows It All. And today we're going to do something a little different, man. Misery loves company, they say. So today we'll be talking about the top five most miserable NFL fan bases. There were a lot of teams in the running for this, and you guys can kind of tell me what you think. If you're a fan of one of these teams, like I said, misery loves company. So this is a safe space. You can talk about all of the misery your team has brought you. This is where you can get off all that emotion, let it out. If you need to cry, they say it's okay to cry at this point in time. So we're going to get right into it. First, we'll start with our honorable mention teams. These are teams who, they've had some misery, but maybe just not enough misery to crack our top five. The Arizona Cardinals, they've been slash Phoenix Cardinals slash St. Louis Cardinals. They've been an organization that's been an also-ran. Right now, they're picked at the start of this season to have the worst team in the NFL, but they didn't crack this list. And part of that is because I don't know that they have like one of the strongest fan bases. So that kind of came into the criteria. And also, they've had some recent success or, kind of recent success with Kurt Warner and Larry Fitzgerald, a team that made it to the Super Bowl, at least within the last 15 years. So when you look at that, you kind of say, okay, they've had some teams that made the playoffs, so they didn't make my list. The Cincinnati Bengals, they have been maybe one of the worst franchises in the history of sports. However, they've now been bestowed with a great quarterback named Joe Burrow. They are a Super Bowl contender this year, and that can all kind of change. Now, they did get smoked their first game of the season, but I think they will probably work out the kinks. So, and we don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. This is historic, years and years of just destitute and disappointment for a fan base. Cincinnati Bengals have been to the Super Bowl 3 times in their history. So, they lost to Joe Montana 2 of those times, and of course, they lost to the Rams most recently. So they're a team that's on the come, maybe. So we'll give them a pass in this as far as being one of the worst teams or franchises as far as having a miserable fan base. The other team, the Chicago Bears, they were a very, very close choice for me, almost being my number 5 team, because the Bears really have not had any success since the 80s, really. They, every now and then they'll spike with Jay Cutler. They have Justin Fields now, remains to be seen. They've kind of ran through coaches already with him and offensive coordinator. So they had Rex Grossman, the Rex Grossman era. I don't know if you guys remember that, and Lovie Smith, where they made it to the Super Bowl. And most recently, against Peyton Manning, where Peyton Manning got his first Super Bowl championship. So they've had some success, but Sunday kind of just made me think, maybe this team is doomed too, because no matter what happens, their rivals, the Green Bay Packers, seem to always be able to beat them no matter who the quarterback is. So they struggle with that, but they did not make my number 5 list. I mean, my top 5 list. They did not make it at number 5 because I went with a team that people may think is maybe not should make this list. So it'll be a bit of a surprise to you. The number 5 team that I have, the Buffalo Bills, are my number 5 most miserable fan base. Now, from the outside looking in, it seems like the Buffalo Bills have a pretty good fan base. They seem pretty happy. They have the Bills Mafia moniker. They throw people through tables. That's what the Bills Mafia does. But I got a couple reasons why I would put them here. First and foremost, 4 straight Super Bowl losses in a row. That is something very difficult to get over if you're a fan base. Now, this happened in the 90s, so they maybe have gotten over that, or some of the people that are fans now may not even remember that. But if you're old enough to remember, like I am, Thurman Thomas and Jim Kelly and Andre Reed and all those guys they had, Lofton at receiver as well, the running red gun offense that they had, with Jim Kelly. They were a great team, but they could never get over the hump. And since then, they at one point had a great drought of making it to the playoffs, but they gotten Josh Allen. They've won 3 straight division titles, but they have a quarterback who is a turnover machine. So it's kind of it's a tough thing right now. I put them at number 5, and one of the main reasons I put them at number 5, because it is cold as you know what in Buffalo. So they have to sit up there in that cold weather every single year and be disappointed in the playoffs if it's a home game. They set through all of that cold, snow, and ice and all that stuff that happened in the 90s and only to lose the Super Bowl. So there hasn't been a payoff yet. And they're a dedicated fan base, but that's my number 5 team. My number 4 team. And these top 4, it really was kind of tough to determine who I would put where. But just kind of based on all the things that have happened, this team made it number 4. The Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions are the number 4 most miserable fan base in the NFL. The reason why? One playoff win since their existence. That's since the early 40s. They've had one playoff win, right? That was 1991. They beat the Dallas Cowboys in that game. Played in the conference championship against the Washington, at the time, Redskins, right? They have not won a playoff game since then. They don't even make it to the playoffs very often. And, it's just disappointing, man. They've been blessed with some of the greatest physical specimen, great athletes in the history of the sport, but it's so bad there that these guys essentially decide to force their own retirements because they can't get out of there. The team won't let them go. So they just decide to retire. You saw this first with Barry Sanders. He was on the precipice of breaking the all-time rushing record, and he just decided to retire. People thought, hey, maybe this is a ploy for him to, try to get traded or moved. The Lions wouldn't budge on that. And essentially we lost the opportunity to continue seeing, in my opinion, the greatest running back of all time. Definitely the greatest or most exciting running back that I've ever seen. Just pure runner. This also happens with Calvin Johnson, Megatron. Comes in like a comet, great career, gets to the playoffs, I think 1 or 2 times, him and Matt Stafford, but they're never able to actually win a game. And a career that seems so promising, a guy that was arguably one of the greatest wide receivers to ever play this game as well, as a physical specimen, definitely forced into retirement just from being in that organization, man. I also have down here the Matt Millen era / error. Matt Millen brought all this hope. He's, the smartest guy in the room, and all he did was continue to run that franchise in the ground. I think they went 3 or 4 years in a row drafting a top wide receiver with the 2nd or 3rd pick, and none of them panned out except for Calvin Johnson, essentially. Maybe Roy Williams, but yeah, Calvin Johnson was the best of that bunch, and Charles Rodgers. They just kept drafting these guys year after year after year, Mike Williams, and it never worked out. Only Calvin Johnson, and we just told you Calvin decided to retire prematurely. The other thing that makes Detroit the number 4 most miserable fan base, they never have a good team, but every Thanksgiving before they have to sit down and get their turkey and enjoy time with their family, they're forced to see their team on TV and all of its disgust, I guess. I won't even say splendor. The opposite of splendor is what we'll call that, disgust. We all have to sit through this, but they actually have to live with it as a fan of that team. It's just unfortunate, man. Detroit Lions, they are my number 4 most miserable fan base. Number 3, again, like I said, this is kind of tough. I actually am going to call an audible on the play. I had another team at number 3, but recent news, I think I was kind of a prisoner of the moment. Like I said, don't want to be a prisoner of the moment. My number 3 team, the New York Jets. The New York Jets just recently lost Aaron Rodgers to an Achilles injury. He's done for the season. Hope had sprung eternal for this team. They thought they were going to get to the Super Bowl, at least be a Super Bowl contender. They finally had the quarterback they needed. They have a great defense. They have running backs. They have it all. And on the 4th play of the season, they lose Aaron Rodgers to a torn Achilles. This is not the first time this has happened to the New York Jets. Coming off of being in the conference championship game in 1998 with Vinny Testaverde, arguably he could, I guess, be in the argument. I guess you could say Joe Namath is the greatest Jets quarterback, but Vinny Testaverde, one of the great quarterbacks in Jets history. They're not many, so, it's an argument I guess you could have. They lose to the Denver Broncos, but they got Bill Parcells. They seem like they're going to come back and have a great year. And in the season opener against the New England Patriots, Vinny Testaverde, you guessed it, he tears his Achilles tendon. How does this happen twice to the same franchise in the same kind of situation? Maybe they're snake bit. It's just misery. If you watch that game Monday night, it was like someone had died. If you see what Sauce Gardner keeps tweeting and posting every day since this injuries happened, it's almost like Aaron Rodgers isn't with us anymore. He's like, I woke up this morning and I had to do our handshake with the air because you weren't here. He's not dead. He's still here. He just tore his Achilles. That's all. But that's how bad things are in New York right now, man. The other thing, you know, hindsight is 2020. Bill Parcells leaves. He leaves the franchise in the hands of one Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick then has a change of heart and decides, I don't want to coach this New York Jets team. And the rest, as they say, is history. He goes on to New England instead with Bob Kraft and wins 7 Super Bowls. And Jets fans everywhere are thinking, oh, this could have been us. We could have been the New England Patriots. Instead, we get smacked by this team every single year, and we have to live with seeing them have what we thought would be our franchise with Bill Belichick. That's why they're number 3. Number 2, I just switched number 3 and number 2 around, but yes, the number 2 franchise, you guessed it, the Cleveland Browns. The mistake by the lake is what they call Cleveland, right? By Lake Erie. This team had their whole franchise taken from them. Storied franchise back in the day. The greatest, one of the greatest football players, if not the greatest, Jim Brown. They won NFL championship after NFL championship. Otto Graham is the greatest, one of the greatest quarterbacks in that era as well. The Super Bowl era starts, and this team cannot get to the Super Bowl. You have the fumble, Ernest Biner running in for a touchdown, fumbles it, and the Denver Broncos go on in 87. The next year, I may be turning these around, but you get the drive from John Elway, doing the same thing, coming from behind, beating this Cleveland team when they thought that they had a championship in hand, one of the best teams. Nope, they're unable to do it. And then, of course, like I said, Art Modell moves the team from Cleveland to Baltimore. And what happens with Baltimore? Baltimore only in the next few years draft Ray Lewis and Jonathan Ogden, and they win 3 Super Bowls with those guys. Excuse me, 2 Super Bowls with those guys, and become a franchise that is one of the model franchises in the NFL. While meanwhile, the Browns do get their team back in 1999, but they run through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback after quarterback, coach after coach after coach, and it's just been an utter failure since then. And maybe Deshaun Watson's the guy now. I don't know. I mean, if he is, I like Deshaun Watson, but I don't know if he's going to recapture what he had previously. Who knows? But it's a tough situation, man. Now, Cleveland fans, of course, maybe they can rest on the fact that LeBron brought them a title a couple years back. But if you're a football fan and a Cleveland Brown fan, it has been pure misery for you since the 60s. And if you're younger than that, you've never known this team since they've come back in 99 to be anything but a pure failure. And now the number 1 team and fan base that is the most miserable fan base in the NFL holds a spot near and dear to my heart. I know all too well about the misery of this fan base because I once was a fan of this team, and I finally divorced myself from them. The Atlanta Falcons. I mean, where should we start? Let's start at 28-3. The worst loss in the history of sports, in my opinion. Not just because I lived through it, but it was the biggest margin of victory that anyone has ever come back from in a championship setting, a championship game. 28-point lead, 28-3 in the fourth quarter of a championship game, and you lose that game. It's the running joke that will run for forever, 28-3. I just saw Matt Ryan's co-analyst in the booth with him crack a joke about a 28-3 lead. A team should be leading 28-3 at halftime. It's just unfortunate, man. That alone would probably be enough. But that's not enough, though, because I got some more for you. Let's say you draft a quarterback number 1. He's going to change your franchise. And eventually he finds himself in a dog fighting scandal and is arrested because federal charges have been brought up on him. This is a number 1 quarterback, a guy that's going to be the face of your franchise, expected to revolutionize the game. And what happens? He's fighting dogs and has to serve a 2-year federal prison sentence, and your franchise is gutted by that. Now, eventually they would get Matt Ryan and actually kind of have the most success they've ever had, but that leads you to the 28-3 thing we just talked about. Well, the first 42 years of this franchise, the fans never experienced back-to-back winning seasons. Franchise was founded in 65, played their first season in 66, and did not have consecutive winning seasons until 2008. That is unreal. No other franchise has ever had this issue. Even the Clippers had back-to-back winning seasons at some point. 42 seasons. And consecutive playoff wins, they didn't have that until 2016 and 17. Now, 16 is when they went to the playoffs and went to the Super Bowl. And of course, 17, they went back, won a game, and then lost to the Eagles the next week. So there you have it, man. It's just drown yourself in the misery of tears. The top 5 most miserable fan bases in the NFL. You have the Buffalo Bills at number 5, the Detroit Lions at number 4, the New York Jets at number 3, the Cleveland Browns at number 2, and my former love, the Atlanta Falcons, are the number 1 team. You guys tell me your stories about your dismay and your disappointment with your franchise, your organization, your team you root for. If you agree with me, comment below. Tell me if you think you got a team that should be in there. Tell me about what has been so miserable about your fan base and your team. And as always, I ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell a friend, share this video. Share the misery. Misery loves company, man. You guys share it. And turn on your notifications, and pray for everyone in these fan bases because they're going through it. Definitely the New York Jets are right now, especially, but all of these franchises, all of these fans of these organizations, they're feeling miserable right now because they stay in a certain state of misery if you root for these teams. As always, may the source be with you. This is Earl Knows It All.